Are you ready to turn your pads of Christmas paper into stacks of Christmas cards? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have the Park Lane Holiday Papercrafting pad from 2024. It doesn't seem like they have names on them, but this is the one that has like the snowmen and Santa Clauses. I did see there was another option, but I wanted to give you a quick flip through to get an idea of what was included in this paper pad. It has a lot of really cute papers, but it does have some challenging bits because there are some of these pattern papers that have quite large scale prints and and then of course there's some with smaller scale prints, but there's another example. So I thought they might be a little bit challenging to use, and I wanted to keep that in mind as I picked a few pattern papers out of here. Another one I see is this one where it has a large image at the bottom. It does also include some of these tags in the back. There are 48 sheets, but only 24 accent tags, even if you cut them all apart. And some of them are quite large, so you're certainly not going to have one for each, but it is a nice inclusion in the paper pad. So today I'm going to be working with my 6x8 paper busting templates because this is a 6x8 paper pad and I'm going to be making A2 size cards. I decided to pick some that would let me use larger bits of paper so that I could take and make use of some of those larger patterns from the collection. I am going to start with the papers for templates 1 and 9, and I am going to be introducing a brand new template today, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So this one, there's actually a lot of similarities between these two sketches. They're going to take two 3x4 inch pieces, and they're going to put them on the back, on top of some striped papers, but this one includes 3 stripes, and this one brings it to just 2. There's also a little bit of a spacing difference between the two that you might notice there. And so this one's going to work well with a large scale patterned paper for the 3x4s, but then I'm going to need a smaller scale pattern paper for these stripes. However, this is single-sided paper, so that becomes a little bit challenging. And what I'm going to do in regards to that is I'm actually going to pick 2 different papers, and I'm going to cut all the stripes that I need out of the more subdued pattern. In this case, I'm going to pick this red snowflake, and there's a sort of mint snowflake later in the paper pad. And those are going to be what I cut my stripes out of, and then I'm going to pick some larger scale patterned papers for my 3x4s, and I'm going to cut all the 3x4s I need out of those. I'll break it down a little bit more later. I think that this Santa is really cute and would work well with that red patterned paper. I am kind of feeling that there's 2 different color schemes. They do mix a little bit here, but I noticed there's like a lot of red and green in some paper, and then some of the papers have more of this like pink and mint combination. I'm going to pick these gingerbreads. I thought about using some of these larger scaled images like these Santas here. They're really cute, but when I thought about what they would look like if I cut them down to 3x4, I noticed that the Santa's going to be positioned in kind of an odd way on these. I'm actually kind of not sure how I'm going to use these at all. I kind of am just like holding up these papers to show you with 3x4. Like, you get most of the, I haven't measured it exactly, but you get a good amount of the Santa in the truck, but then you'd kind of just get like the bottom here, and I just don't think it will work out. So today I'm not focusing on using necessarily the most challenging papers from the pad, but I am going to use some larger scale and some smaller scale patterns. And then once I have picked out what I want for each sketch, I usually like to put them in these plastic folders. There are some other options out there, but I can put these to the side and look at my next sketch. So here I have paper busting sketch number 7. This similarly starts with a 3x4 in the center, but instead of having the stripes, it has these triangles in the corner. And I was kind of inspired to do a lot of designs that utilize 3x4 for 6x8 pattern papers because at the time I was designing these were some of the first ones that I shared. There was a lot of pattern papers out there that had 3x4 like cut aparts with the with the 6x8 paper pads. So I wanted to make sure that people could I could use those easily. I think that these reindeer are really cute, and so I want to make use of them. Something to note about those previous sketches is that I needed non-directional pattern paper for the stripes, because as you can see, I'm cutting the stripes down the paper like so. I'm cutting them from this section of the paper, and then I'm going to turn them on their side. So the 4 inches is going to be across. So hopefully that makes sense there. And so a non-directional pattern paper is really important. There are quite a few directional pattern papers in the collection, so I will keep those things like that in mind. However, this sketch, even these background triangles work with directional patterned paper. So I'm going to I'm going to find a directional pattern paper that I like that goes with that. And I saw these pink trees, and I kind of like that, even though they're a bit bold in terms of some of the trees are quite large on here, because they're tone on tone, it's going to be better for our background image than some other large scale patterns. Or even if you look at, there's another set of trees here. These actually read as busier, even though they're smaller, and therefore you might be able to cut them into smaller bits because of they have that higher contrast going on and the white background, which is going to mean that they definitely need a mat. And if you notice, there are no mats called for here. Sorry, they don't definitely need a mat. If you're using them on white cardstock, I recommend mats when you have white as the background color, because it helps them to stand out a lot. But this asks for no mats, so I like going with a pattern paper that has a colored background. And so I'm going to pick that for sketch number 7. I think that organizing how I'm going to use the pattern paper before I start cutting everything, and knowing that these are not going to create any scraps, I'm going to use the whole piece of pattern paper. So thinking carefully about how I want to use my paper before I start chopping helps me a lot, because if I just sort of like pick the first one that comes to mind, I might find that I don't have enough left over when I want to do something that requires a more specialty patterned paper. Okay, this is sketch number 20. It's one that I like to use when I'm making a lot of cards because it only has 2 pieces. It's really easy. You can use a large chunk of pattern paper, and even the smaller focal point is not that small. It's 3x3. So I think we can go in again and get one of those larger scale patterned papers. I am going to be using these on my cards today, and I'm going to cut them off screen. So you'll see these cut apart later in the video, but I did want to mention that. Okay, so here I think these snowmen are really cute, and I can, because I'm using fairly large chunks of them, even if I do like a 3x3, that's still going to show you a good amount of snowman. So I think it's going to be cute and work out well, but I probably will pair it with a more plain pattern. I'm not going to pick 2 really bold, because those snowmen are pretty bold by themselves. So maybe this plaid paper, because this plaid paper is a little bit less bold, a little bit less busy, yet has a larger scale plaid. There are some smaller scale plaids, but I think it could work out because these pieces are going to be large enough that you'll see the plaid. So that's going to be sketch number 20. And then my new sketch for today for 6x8 patterned paper is 6x8 paper busting template number 21. I actually have designed 10 new 6x8 paper busting templates. I'm sharing just this one today, and the rest will be shared for free over the coming months here on my YouTube channel. But my patrons and my patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube members get early access to the templates, or you can purchase them individually. So you purchase like a pack of the new templates on Etsy so that you can get them ahead of time in one go. But if you might notice, this looks kind of familiar. I have a 6x6 paper busting template that looks a lot like this. The 6x8 version of the template does allow you to cut with a little bit more of continuity. What I mean by that is, in order to make this design work for 6x6 paper, I have to cut all of the stripes right in a row. So if you have a patterned paper where you really want it to look like you've kind of pieced it back together, that doesn't work very well in the 6x6 version, but you can do it in the 6x8 version, and we'll talk about that more when we're cutting this patterned paper. but I decided I wanted to pick something that would look good even at 1/2 inch, because these are 1/2 inch strips. So I can bring my pattern paper and just show you what a 1/2 inch would look like. And that's what I test out for myself. I'm like, is that enough that you can notice and see the pattern? And I think that it is. But it's like, for example, this candy cane paper. If I were to only do 1/2 inch of it, you're going to get a lot of like blank space here. And so when I cut it to that 3 inch mark, you know, you can kind of tell that it's supposed to be a candy paper, but it's not as clear. And so I always try to take that time and think about it. What does this look like if you had just 1/2 inch? I really don't think I would use the Santas for that, even though they'd be really cute as a focal point. Maybe this would be great for a sketch 20, for example. Even these Christmas trees. You're never going to get a whole Christmas tree, or rarely going to get a whole Christmas tree. So it's probably not what I'm going to pick. But with these holly leaves, you might even get a whole holly leaf in 1/2 inch. Another thing I wanted to point out before I get going any further, because I've now picked all my pattern papers, I have 5 templates, so I can make 5 different designs of cards, but we're going to be mixing up the pattern paper and things like that, is these are, instead of being 6 by 8, they're a little bit extra, and they have this hole in the top. So this is a perforated edge here. I'm going to primarily be cutting it off just so that it looks a little bit smoother. But this extra bit that is at the top of these papers, one, I do not consider it a scrap because these are designed for 6 by 8 patterned paper. I haven't designed them around the hole, and even still, you'd have to know whether the hole was perforated or just meant to be cut off or whatever. So these are not factored into my sketches. But what I would often do with something like this is I would just cut it on an angle so it has sort of the look of a banner, and I would put that inside my card as decoration, or on some of my patterned papers that are maybe a little bit more tone on tone or subtle, I might even use this strip to stamp a sentiment and add it to some of my cards. So you might see those later on in the video. We will talk at some point in the video about how to finish off the inside of the cards. So when I first introduced let me talk about a little about the format of the video. Once I've picked everything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I cut the paper for this template, and then how I assemble this card, and I will show you all the cards I created. Each 6 by 8 piece of patterned paper creates 2 cards. And for most of these sketches, I have picked 4 papers. So in this case, it will make 8 cards. However, there was one sketch that makes more cards. So you'll see that per patterned paper, but then I only picked 2 patterned papers. So I believe you'll see 8 of each card today. So I've cut these down to 6 by 8, cutting the tops off of them, and I'll be doing that for all of them off screen. And then I want to talk about how I'm going to approach this, because I'm thinking that this is directional pattern paper. All the heads of the gingerbread people are at the top of the paper, but I'm only going to be cutting these to 3 by 4 inch pieces, and I'm not going to be cutting any of the strips. The way I designed these is that they could work with 1 sheet of patterned paper, but when you're working with single-sided pattern paper, if you want to mix up your patterns, you can cut 2 papers following the sketch and then mix and match. Or you can, and this only works on some sketches. Now, because these 1.5 by 4 inch strips come out of the same size as the 3 by 4s, I can cut all of my pink paper to 3 by 4. And then I can cut all of this mint snowflake paper to 1.5 by 4 and still get what I need to make the cards. So something to consider, especially in these instances where the math works out really well. And because this is non-directional pattern paper, I'm going to be able to put these I'm going to be able to turn them on their side and use them for the top and bottom of the card. So If you want to cut cardstock mats for all of your cards, you find the cardstock mat measurements right here on the sketch. So it says 4 by 1.5 inch, that's the pattern paper, with a 4 1/4 by 1 3/4 inch mat. And so I'm not going to show you cutting all the cardstock today. I think just having those measurements, a lot of you guys will be very comfortable cutting out the cardstock. There are like efficient ways to try to cut it, like because this is a 4 1/4 inch piece of cardstock. If you're cutting from an 8.5 by 11, 8.5 divided by half is 4 1/4. So you might want to cut it to 3 1/4 by 8.5 and then cut that in half and get a really efficient use of cardstock. But I also always advocate for using your scraps first. Also in this case, I sometimes will, especially if I'm making a lot of cards at once, think, is there some times where like I don't necessarily need the mats to like the end result of the card? And because I'm using a white card base, and this is a mostly colored piece of card or patterned paper, obviously there's the white snowflakes on it, but it really stands out against the white background. It doesn't really need that additional layer to help it stand out. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just reduce the number of mats I need and only cut mats for the 3 by 4 inch piece here in the center. I think you could even skip that if you wanted to, but to me, it's another opportunity to pull in this teal color that complements the mint and pulls everything together really well. In addition to using some of the tags from the back of the paper pad, and there are 24 accent tags, but like I said, some of them are quite large, so I did use a good amount of them throughout this process. But I also have this Embellish It box that was a free gift with purchase from scrapbook.com, and it has a lot of these like chipboard pieces that have a Christmas theme. Oh, I think it's on the back of the here it kind of shows you like what all the things were included. So it has some red, green, silver, black, gold. And so I was able to pull from these embellishments a lot in order to accent these cards. But I did find that the surface of these is a little slick. And in that case, I do tend to recommend liquid glue over a tape adhesive. A tape adhesive, in my experience, you're more likely to get these elements to pop off when they're only held on by tape, but they do better with glue. And so I will show you that some of the completed cards, in addition to this one that I've assembled here, I was able to take some of those offcuts from other cards and these topper pieces and stamp on those my sentiment, and again pull in that teal color. I used primarily Lawn Fawn ink. I think it was maybe Peacock, but just a teal color. And as you can see, pull in little bits of the chipboard from that collection throughout these as accents. Next up, we are looking at template number 9, which again has those strips in the background, which we are going to cut all the strips that we need from this red snowflake paper, and then we are going to cut all the 3 by 4 inch rectangles that we need from this Santa paper. So very similar to how we did the last sketch, we just have a few more strips in the background. We go to assemble the card for template number 9. I did decide again to forego the cardstock mats, but the cardstock mats, as you can see, would lead it edge to edge on the card base. And so I think that I would choose slightly different spacing because I am foregoing the cardstock mats, and I'm putting these closer to the bottom edge and leaving an even amount on these 3 sides, and doing that again at the top. You can use your grid mat to help you know exactly where the center, or if you have a grid mat, or you can use a graph paper, you can draw a box, whatever. Like there's many options out there, but if you want to be more sure that you're putting something in the center, being able to line it up here on the grid mat helps quite a bit. I also found that because this is such a bold patterned paper here in terms of it having that black background, and I did put it on a craft card base instead of a white card base, I think that that also helps it to pop, because The white card base, I find that it tends to need a mat more readily than a colored card base. So something I suggest is if you feel like you have a lot of your card base still showing, switch to a colored card base. I have a few other tips for what to do if you feel like there's a little too much white space in the background of your card, and I'll try to remember to leave a link to that video. But I am going to come in again with a chipboard accessory from the American Crafts collection that I showed you earlier, and the red is a little bit different. This red is certainly a little bit brighter than the more deep reds, but I still think that it works well. And in fact, in this case, it just kind of makes it pop a little bit more. And so I like that look. And let's take a look at some of the other cards that I created. I did add in a stamp set. I actually think I pulled from 2 different stamp sets from scrapbook.com, but on some of these that are the tags from the back of the paper, and you'll know now I have 2 of this pattern paper pack. Had a little issue where I needed to re-record parts of this, and so I'm kind of trying to mix up my style a little bit too based on that. But I took like that Santa and I added a sentiment to it. And I was going to do that on a few of them, similar here on the holly leaves. But then I also incorporated some of the chipboard bits. This one actually was a tag and had a little hole on it. I always feel like I have to put like a string or twine in the hole, but I decided, what if I just cut it off and made it a simple sentiment coming off the side? Because this is a pretty bold pattern paper, and I'm okay with kind of letting it do its thing and shine and not feel like I need to put an extra embellishment on this card. Let's take a moment to talk about decorating the inside of the cards. I think that as card makers, we always like to, make the whole card really special. And so I think that these little strips can be a great way to add a little something to the extra to the inside of the cards. Also, there was these ornaments that were like one big long strip, but I realized I could cut them in half. And so I think I could layer some of these up on the inside of the card and add a little bit of extra to the bottom to decorate it. There are jokes on my website at jesscrafts.com that you can put inside of your cards, whether you're giving them to family and friends or you're donating your cards. And also I have, and these are in my Etsy shop. Now, today, when I'm releasing this video, my plan is to release it on Small Business Saturday, and I will be having an Etsy one-day shop sale, kind of like Small Business Saturday comes after Black Friday. It's a fun time to have a big sale, and so there'll be everything, including my paper busting templates, including the new paper busting template that I'm sharing with this video, will be on sale. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. But I have these card inserts, and so you can put them inside your card, and it adds like a little dot and box game or a maze, or there's like, this is a little like poem activity that you can do, a word search. They're just really simple color by number things that you can add inside of the cards just to like give them a little bit something extra fun. And in addition to the card templates that we've talked about, another thing that I offer in the Etsy shop are printable card toppers. And so you may have seen these on some of my other videos. I decided not to use any today, but they are like, you can print them out onto cardstock, cut them out, you can resize them. I do give you a PDF where they're all about 2 inches, but you can also resize them. And then you can use those to embellish your cards as well. So all those fun things on sale in the Etsy shop today. And but also the free option of just getting those jokes at jesscrafts.com, and I will link those so that you can finish off the inside of your cards. Or there's many fun stamp sets that have inside sentiments, like from Sunny Studios, I think Trinity Stamp, Waffle Flower Stamp, all kinds of places make those. For 6x8 paper busting template number 7, I'm going to do the same thing that I've been doing on the last 2 cards, where I'm going to cut all of one piece, or all of one shape out of one piece of paper, and all the other shape out of the other piece of paper. So all my 3x4 inches are going to be the reindeer, and all of my triangles are going to be these pink trees. In the template, I show you that when you have your 3x4 inch rectangle, and you're going to cut it into triangles by cutting it on the diagonal, I'm showing you cutting it from what, once you have your 3x4, and we can cut one real quick to take a look at that. I don't want to spend too much time cutting today. I want to really focus on some of the design stuff, the things that I think will be most helpful, because a lot of people are comfortable with how to use the measurements. Okay, so I'm showing you cutting it from the top right to the bottom left, and then you can split it apart on the card. If for some reason you cut it the opposite way, that's okay. You're just gonna, instead of putting it on these opposite corners, you're just gonna put it on the other opposite corners of your card base. So don't get too worried. I make mistakes like that on the regular. I try, but I get caught up, especially when I'm recording. Sometimes is more likely to make the mistake because I'm trying to like talk it out or share something. And so I just want to let you know that there's usually a way to make it work, even if you make a miscut on these cards. I decided again to go with craft card bases for these, in part because there are no called for mats on those triangles. And I also just thought that the craft cardstock looked really cute with the pink. I did put a pink mat behind my 3x4 inch, but when I go to cut these, when I go to glue these triangles, I tend to reach for my liquid glue, which is not always my first go-to for gluing down pattern paper. In my experience, the Barely Art glue and the scrapbook.com Artiste glue do not wrinkle my patterned paper, and I would be fine to use them to glue down layers of patterned paper or cardstock. I'm happy with them. But there are some glues that will do that. But I like to do the liquid glue because it gets into that corner much better. Whereas I can't really do that very well with a tape runner. It also really helps me to I can push it into the corner a little bit easier, because when you have the liquid glue, it kind of like floats on top of the surface a little bit. But once it's down, it's down. So that's the other thing that there's the kind of that counterpoint about liquid glue, is I can't really peel it up the way I would be able to something that had tape runner on the back. And so I'm placing my reindeer paper on top, and then this is one of the little cut aparts from the patterned paper pack. It's a little bit larger than the 3x4 rectangle, but I still thought it worked, and it helped to pull in some of the green and kind of make it pop from the pink. And so I did a similar thing where I used some of my scraps of greens that came from the top of the patterned paper, and I stamped with pink. Actually, there might be red ink that was on there. These are from the cut aparts from the collection as well, except for that you would have to make a point to cut out the banner shapes specifically. The papers in the back, they have a lot of white around them, and so you could just cut them with a white border, but I really wanted them to have no border, so I just kind of used a scissor to cut around that. I think that I'm not sure if okay, here they are. So let's be merry. I even changed it up. It's kind of a tag shape in the way it's originally presented, but I instead cut it on its side like that. So that does mean I had a few scraps, I suppose, from this patterned paper pack. But again, I'm really focusing on how this doesn't create patterned paper scraps. And those are things I wouldn't consider scraps because I wouldn't consider to save them. But we have 8 cards made with this design. Now looking at paper busting template number 20. This is where I'm going to go back to my more traditional, or the way I typically do things when I have single-sided paper. What I'm more likely to do is to cut all 4 of my sheets, or however many sheets. Usually if I'm single-sided paper, I'd have at least 2 different patterns. So what I'm more likely to do is take the 2 patterns and cut them exactly like the template says, and then swap the pieces. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'll be cutting these to 3x5 and 3x3, and then taking these measurements, 3 1/4 by 5 1/4, and cutting out some coordinating mats. In this case, I am picking green cardstock because I thought that it kind of helped to pull these 2 papers together. This has a lot of the mint in the background here, and this has none of it, but they both had that green. So we put this larger piece in the back, and I'll put the pattern paper on top of it. Then I wanted to show you one way that I like to use my cardstock scraps, because my templates do no patterned paper scraps, but there certainly are some cardstock scraps left over. Oh, I needed a scissor, and even though I have I have a little caddy on my desk that holds several pairs of scissors, and sometimes even though it has several pairs of scissors in it, there are no scissors left in it because I've scattered them all throughout my desk. But at least they have a home to go back to in the end. So sometimes I'll take my scrap of patterned paper and I will use it to prop up something that I'm layering on top. So it's not a very big deal in this instance, but this piece of cardstock would overhang this other piece of cardstock, and to give it a more like flat finish look, I just took that scrap of green cardstock and glued it underneath there. And then I can put this plaid down and I can think about which way I like it best, because it is a square, so it's pretty flexible there and it's non-directional. Then I'm taking one of the little cut aparts and finishing off the card. You could cut this tag out if that's more your personal style. I thought the green background was a little too dark to stamp on, but I think you would see a black sentiment on there if you wanted to stamp a sentiment in black ink. And then to show you what I mean about mixing and matching. So out of both sheets of paper, I cut the snowman at the 3x5 and 3x3. And you can see here, here's the 3x5 piece being used, here's the 3x3 piece being used, and then the plaid is swapped. And so that's what I usually do, but I did it a little bit different on the first few cards. And this is where I did use a good majority of the cut aparts. Like all of these have different cut aparts, but as you can see, since it's 8 cards, that's already a third of my cut aparts from this collection. So I needed to come up with some extra embellishments for sure. So let's move on to our new template for this video, 6x8 paper busting template number 21. The reason that I wanted to do it again in the 6x8 form is because I could do something that that I couldn't do when I had it as 6x6. So you can take your 6x8 paper, cut it to a 3x4 square, and then you can take these 3x4 squares and you can cut the 2 1/2-inch pieces you need and fit it back together like a puzzle. So what I mean by that is take this 4-inch piece and I measure 1/2 inch off the bottom, turn it around, measure 1/2 inch off the top, and then when I go to glue these papers down, you can line these back up. So I might not have picked the ideal piece to show you this. Then where's the cut? Oh, it's at the sides of the paper. Sorry guys, I lost track for a second. Here we go. That goes there. This goes here. And so then when you put them on the paper, you can separate them like that and the pattern looks continuous. Now, this is actually not super important to me personally. You'll see on my cards that I'm not doing this for all of them, but you can. So like if you have a striped pattern paper, you can make sure that they all line up. And with the 6x6 version of the sketch, as I mentioned earlier, you had to put all the little 1/2 inches into one 3x3 square. So you take a 6x6 and you cut it into 4 3x3 squares, and then one of them gets cut into all these little 1/2 inch strips. And so it doesn't always line up with the other side of the paper. So I thought it was cool that you could make this design work in this way that some people, I'm sure, will prefer. Again, like I mentioned, this is the first of a new set of 10. You can subscribe to the channel and you'll see these 6x8 paper busting templates being released over the coming months, or you could check out the Etsy shop and just buy the new pack and have them ready to go for when the new videos are shared. You're like, yep, I already printed them off. Let me go grab it and get crafting with you. And so we'll take a look at how to assemble that card. So I made sure to include an example where they were all lined up. I'm going to start by trying to center this piece. It would probably help if I laid my card down straight, and I can use the grid lines to kind of guide me in both directions. And then I want to make sure that I'm placing this such that it would line up like a puzzle. And similarly here on the bottom, make sure I have that orientation. And it just gives this nice clean look. But as you can see, there are other times where they absolutely don't match up. I think that either way is still cute. I have not embellished every single one of these yet. I gotta go through and look at all those little chipboard pieces, and I am often pairing a sentiment with a little image if I can, just to use up a few more of those. Because this, ooh, squeaky there, this patterned paper is a little bit more simple and small scale. I think you can add these little chipboard embellishments, whereas some of the other patterns that we worked with today, I tried the chipboard like embellishments in addition to the sentiment, and it just looked like too much. There was already enough going on in their backgrounds. Okay, so now we have 40 cards, 8 of each design, 5 designs. Hopefully I can do multiplication there, of these different 6x8 paper busting templates, mixing up some of the embellishments to make them a little bit unique, mixing up the patterned paper sometimes. These are, again, single-sided patterned paper, so I did try to do my best to make that work and still make them kind of interesting given that limitation there. And we did a mix of craft cardstock and the white card bases and craft card bases. I love a good craft card base at Christmas. You'll see that in some of my other large Christmas paper busting videos. And a reminder that you can shop the Etsy sale. If you're watching this on the day it's released, there's a big Etsy sale, but there's always a coupon code for the Etsy shop in the video description below in case you're interested in picking up the new set of templates or anything else like the card inserts or the card toppers that I share as well, because they do really help to make quick finishing on cards. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.